The United States Trade Representative has proposed a sweeping new trade action against around 60 economies, including India, over the allegations that they have failed to effectively prohibit and enforce bans on the import of goods produced using forced labor. Notably, the move comes after a Section 301 investigation under the U.S. Trade Act of 1974, which concluded that the trade practices of these economies are unreasonable and place a burden on U.S. commerce. And according to the USTR, the investigation began in March 2026 and involved an extensive review process that included testimony from nearly 60 witnesses and more than 500 written comments and rebuttals. After evaluating the submissions, the agency determined that several countries have either failed to impose proper import bans on forced labor goods or have not effectively enforced existing restrictions. USTR Ambassador Jamison Greer said that the situation is unacceptable, arguing that the failure of major trading partners to address forced labor in supply chains creates an uneven global playing field. He stated that American workers are being forced to compete against artificially low-cost imports that is linked to exploitative labor practices, which he described as a distortion of fair trade. He further added that while some partners have taken initial steps through trade agreements and commitments, most countries still need to significantly strengthen enforcement mechanisms. Notably, the list of affected economies is broad and includes major global players such as India, China, Japan, Australia, South Korea, Saudi Arabia, Vietnam, the United Kingdom and the United Arab Emirates. And all these countries are among 54 economies identified as having failed to impose and effectively enforce prohibitions on forced labor-linked imports. A separate group including Canada, Mexico, Indonesia, Pakistan and the European Union Equator has been cited for failing to effectively enforce such prohibitions despite having formal policies in place. And as part of the proposed action, the USTR has suggested imposing additional tariffs on imports from these economies. Countries that have already adopted or committed to forced labor import bans through agreements such as reciprocal trade frameworks could face an additional 10% duty, while all other economies could be subject to tariffs as high as 12.5%. Notably, a separate mechanism has also been proposed specifically for textile and apparel imports, which are considered particularly sensitive under the investigation. However, the proposal does include certain exemptions, and products such as beef, coffee and selected agricultural goods may be excluded from the additional duties. And in addition, imports from Canada and Mexico that comply with North American trade agreements could also be exempt, along with certain categories of textiles and apparel under specific conditions. The development comes at a sensitive moment in global trade relations, particularly as India and the United States continue negotiations on a bilateral trade agreement. Both the countries have been engaged in multiple rounds of talks that is aimed at finalizing an interim deal covering tariffs, digital trade, agriculture and market access. Despite periodic tensions, the United States remains India's largest trading partner, with bilateral goods trade exceeding $120 billion in the recent years. Notably, the proposed tariff action is also seen as part of a broader push by the United States in order to strengthen its trade enforcement strategy following legal and political setbacks to the earlier tariff measures. The Donald Trump administration has been working on rebuilding its tariff framework, and the Section 301 process is being used as a legal pathway in order to introduce new trade restrictions where necessary. And the USTR has clarified that the current announcement does not immediately impose tariffs. Instead, it opens a public consultation process with written comments invited until July 6, that is followed by public hearings that is scheduled for July 7. And after this stage, the agency will review feedback before making a final recommendation. Only after approval by the U.S. administration would any tariffs or trade restrictions be formally implemented. And if enforced, the proposed measures could have wide-ranging implications for global supply chains, affecting manufacturing hubs across Asia, the Middle East, Europe and the Americas. The additional duties could raise costs for exporters and potentially reshape trade flows, particularly in a labor-intensive industries such as textiles and apparel. And the USTR also noted that the absence of effective forced labor import bans undermines global efforts in order to eliminate exploitative labor practices and allows lower-cost production to distort international markets. And it argues that such gaps not only harm ethical trade standards but also disadvantage businesses that comply with labor regulations. And at the same time, the proposal comes amid ongoing diplomatic engagement between Washington and several of the affected countries, including India, as they attempt to balance trade cooperation with regulatory and market access concerns. And the outcome of this process is expected to influence the direction of future trade relations and could become a key point of contention in ongoing bilateral and multilateral negotiations. That's all for now. Stay tuned to the Savera for more updates. Do like, comment and subscribe to the channel.